Welcome to the Misery Man, where every story pulls you deeper into the dark corners of American history. And every shadow reminds you that the past never stays buried. If you love real suspense, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because tonight's story will make you afraid of every house you've ever lived in. This story begins in a quiet, unassuming town in Pennsylvania, where a man named Ethan Hale thought he'd finally found a bit of peace. He was coming off a rough divorce, the kind that leaves you feeling hollowed out. And all he wanted was a fresh start, a quiet place to lick his wounds and figure out what came next. He found a rental house on the edge of town, on a street called Hawthorne Road. It was old, a little rundown, and most importantly, it was cheap. The locals, when he'd stop by the diner for coffee, would get this strange look in their eyes when he mentioned the place. They'd say it had history, but in America, especially in these forgotten small towns, when people say a place has history, sometimes they mean something else entirely. Sometimes they mean it is scars. The house stood there at the end of the road, looking quiet and almost sad, with a single porch light that flickered like a dying heartbeat. As Ethan pulled his old pickup truck into the driveway, he felt a mix of relief and a faint, unplaceable unease. He started unloading boxes, each one feeling heavier than it should, his smile a little weak, a little forced. He was trying to convince himself this was a good move. When he put the key in the lock and pushed the front door open, it let out a deep, groaning creak that seemed to echo not just through the house, but right through his bones. It was unnaturally loud, a sound full of protest. He should have taken that creak as a warning. He should have turned around right then, gotten back in his truck, and never looked back. But he didn't. He stepped inside. The living room was surprisingly clean, dusted and empty, but it felt wrong. The air was heavy, still, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. The landlord had told him over the phone that the place had been empty since 1989, 30 long years. But the strange part, the part that made the hairs on Ethan's arms stand up, was the floor. As he walked across the old wooden floorboards, he noticed they felt warm to the touch. Not just a little warm, but distinctly, undeniably warm. Like someone had just walked on them moments before he arrived. That first night, sleep wouldn't come. Ethan lay in his new bed, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old house settling. But then he heard it. Footsteps. In the hallway just outside his bedroom door. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. The sound of someone pacing, waiting. His heart hammered against his ribs. He grabbed the heavy flashlight he kept by his bed and crept to the door, flinging it open. The hall was empty, a long, dark, silent stretch of nothing. He shrugged it off like any American trying to stay sane in a creepy situation would. It's an old house. It makes new sounds. It's no big deal, but the house wasn't done with him. It was just getting started. The next morning, the sun streamed in, and the fear of the night before felt a little silly. He went into the kitchen to make some coffee, needing the caffeine to clear his head. And that's when he saw it. The cabinets, every single one of them, from the floor to the ceiling, was hanging wide open. He stood there, confused. He knew he hadn't opened them. He hadn't even unpacked his kitchen supplies yet. With a sigh, he walked around the room, methodically closing each one. He turned around to grab his coffee mug from the counter. When he turned back, they were all open again, wide, silent, like a row of mouths waiting to swallow him whole. A cold dread crept up his spine. This wasn't just an old house making noises. This was something else. He backed out of the kitchen, his hands trembling slightly. He had to get some answers. He called the landlord, the number he'd been given on a scrap of paper. It rang and rang, then went to a voicemail that was full. He sent an email. It bounced back, address not found. Getting desperate, he sat down at his laptop and Googled the address, 140 to Hawthorne Road. The search results came back blank. Nothing. No property records, no sales history, not even a mention on a map. It was like the house, this physical place he was standing in, didn't exist online. It was a digital ghost. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a hungry animal. The lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the living room. Ethan sat on the couch, nursing a beer, feeling frustrated and trapped. Then, the old, bulky television in the corner of the room flickered to life all by itself. The screen was a chaotic mess of static, but through the snow, he could make out an old news report. A reporter stood in the rain, her voice tinny and distant, talking about a local family that had gone missing. From Hawthorne Road, the date on the screen read 1989, the Hale family. That name hit Ethan like a physical blow. The Hale family, because his last name was Hale, too. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't random. The house hadn't just been available. It had been waiting. It wanted him. His blood ran cold. The TV screen flickered again, showing a blurry family photograph. A mother, a daughter, and a father. The man in the photo, though grainy and faded, looked shockingly, impossibly like him. It was his face, just younger, staring back at him from the past. Panic seized him. He scrambled for the remote, mashing the power button. Nothing happened. He lunged for the wall and yanked at the power cord, but his hand closed on empty air. The cord wasn't even plugged in. And in that instant, the lights shut off, plunging the entire house into absolute, suffocating darkness. The storm outside seemed to die down, and a dead silence fell. And that's when he heard it. A voice right behind him. So soft, so close he could feel the breath on his neck. It was a whisper. "Welcome home, Ethan." He didn't scream. He just ran. He burst out the front door, not even bothering to close it, and scrambled into his truck. He jammed the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life, and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. He didn't care where he was going, just away. He drove for what felt like 10 minutes, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, his headlights illuminated a street sign up ahead. As he passed it, his stomach twisted into a knot of pure terror. The sign read, Hawthorne Road. Impossible. He slammed his foot on the gas, driving faster, desperately putting distance between himself and that place. He drove for 30 minutes straight, the road a black ribbon disappearing under his wheels. And then, there it was again, the same sign. Hawthorne Road. He screamed in frustration, a raw, ragged sound of a man braking. He tried turning left, turning right, cutting through what looked like back roads and dirt paths. But every road just seemed to bend and curve, leading him back. It was a maze with no exit. Finally, his truck sputtered to a stop, the engine dying right in front of the house. The flickering porch light seemed to mock him. The house wasn't just a place, it was a trap. Defeated, he stepped out of the truck. His legs felt like lead. As he walked back to the front door, which still hung open, the moment his hand touched the doorknob, the entire house seemed to let out a long, deep sigh. A sound of relief, like it had been holding its breath for 30 years, waiting for him to return. He stepped inside, and it was no longer the empty, dusty house he'd entered before. The shadows in the corners weren't still anymore. They were moving, twisting, coalescing into dark, vaguely human shapes that swayed in the darkness. They were all turning toward him. What really happened to the Hale family back in 1989? Why did they just vanish without a trace? And why, after all these years, did this house choose him? What did it want from him? If you want part 2. If you need to know what happens next, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because this house, it isn't done with Ethan yet. And neither are we. Come back before the house comes for you.